Bangladeshis are voting for the 12th parliamentary elections amid calls for boycott and shutdown and a crackdown on demonstrations in the lead-up to the polls. To talk more on the polls in Bangladesh, we're now being joined by Dr. Sabir Ahmed, who is a professor at Department of Political Science at the University of Dhaka. Thanks very much for taking out time and joining us here on WION, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Ahmed, now Bangladeshis are voting in the 12th parliamentary elections amidst a boycott by the main opposition party and a crackdown on the demonstrators in the run-up to the polls. How do you see the polls panning out in Bangladesh today?
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the beginning, that this is a must. This is a constitutional obligation, this election. So the Election Commission has long been trying to, to bring all the political parties to participate in this election, and accordingly, they were trying actually. They even invited them to sit for a dialogue, but many parties joined the dialogue, but except the main opposition, BNP, it didn't participate in the dialogue. So finally, the opposition, they didn't participate in this dialogue. So it is not the jurisdiction of the Election Commission to, force someone to come to the election. It can invite them, but it cannot force them. So finally, the opposition didn't come because for a long time they wanted to, they wanted to remove this government from power, and there was no legitimate ground actually to oust the governments. Accordingly, they launched movement against this government, but they found no ground among the common masses. So finally, the election has been holding today in Bangladesh, all over the country. And during this election, there are many incidences all over. At least in 21 centers, they put arsons to the centers, the polling centers, and long time actually they put arsons to the public transport, public train, and many people were killed. But however, the election is generally the election more or less is peaceful. And until
right, Professor Ahmed, just the point you made there on how elections is must in Bangladesh and it's in accordance with the constitution of Bangladesh. But I want to ask you that how credible will the elections be which are currently taking place in Bangladesh, keeping in mind that the main opposition party, the BNP, has clearly boycotted the elections?
The question of credibility, the Election Commission has put his best efforts to make this election credible, so that its credibility can only be maintained actually if all the political parties participate in this election. So as you know, that the main opposition, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, they represent at least 35 to 6% support among the voters. So they didn't come to this election to participate. So naturally, the question will remain, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if they don't come, election will not be held. It has to be, if BNP doesn't come, election must be held. And election has, although this election, as you have said, that credibility will remain a question. That credibility, of course, to avoid or to manage this credibility, the ruling party, allegedly they have allowed their own party's independent candidates to contest in this election, so that this election becomes competitive, so that the people, the more and more come to the polling centers. So if the more people come to the polling centers, the more will be acceptable. So there,
Right.
I'm not saying I'm not saying that even this issue is going to, is going to make this election credible, fully credible. But both sides have tried actually. Election Commission, of course, the ruling party have tried, and there are some other parties. 20, as you know, that 28 political parties, they have been contesting in this election, and some king's parties are also taking part in this election. So somehow, election, quote unquote, is going to take place. Is
Right, Professor
is
Ahmed.
going.
Election is
Thank
taking place in Bangladesh as we speak. You spoke of how people will turn out to the polling booths. You equated that with credibility. But in the 4 hours to the polling, the election voter turnout stands at 18.5%. How do you assess
Yes,
this lower voter turnout in Bangladesh?
that was expected because, you know, that was expected, and in fact, we predicted that the voter turnout will be around 40 to 45%. 40 to 5%. In our law, there is no legal provision in anywhere in Bangladesh election related laws where it is written this percentage of vote will give an election credibility. So so it's a big question. What percentage of votes will give a will make an election a credible election? So if there is a huge discussion here going on in Bangladesh. What percentage of vote will make the election or may make this election credible? So finally, I'm not saying that this has been taken for this has been accepted as the benchmark. But if it is 40 to 45%, I mean that's all. That will be a tolerable level of people's participation in election, given the situation. Thank you.
Right, Professor Ahmed. And how do you assess the role of over 100 foreign observers who are present at different polling booths in Bangladesh to make sure that free and fair elections take place in the South Asian country?
You know, the problem is it is a very delicate question because the foreign observers, they come to these countries. It is not possible for all the foreign observers to visit all the polling centers. So it is the election authorities, in fact, they guide them, so they take them to different constituencies. So whenever they are at the polling centers, it is not possible for them to observe whether the election is, holding free and fair. But this time actually, the, this time the election commission has done its best to allow the foreign observers to visit different places, because I have seen on the television channels about the foreign observers' comments, and 2, 3 foreign observers I have listened their comments, and what I have heard that they are satisfied with what has happened so far in the elections. But in my point of view, actually, earlier I have also seen that foreign observers' role here in Bangladesh, you know, it it has made very little impact on actually on determining the credibility of the election. It is a kind of a routine observation. So they come and visit and they give their comments. So
But then how exactly, right, Professor Ahmed, but then how exactly can Bangladesh ensure free and fair election takes place when the main opposition party has boycotted the polls and the allegations, severe allegations against the Hasina government of rigging the polls?
Sorry, can you just repeat it, please?
Right, I was asking then how can Bangladesh ensure that free and fair elections takes place in the country, given the severe allegations against the Hasina government of rigging the polls, and also keeping in mind how the main opposition party, the BNP itself, has boycotted the polls completely?
You know, through this election, through this 12th parliamentary election, I think that Bangladesh's electoral politics has undergone a kind of paradigm shift. Now, there is a serious problem in our political process, electoral politics, and that problem has to be addressed. A serious political, brainstorming needed. And how can we actually move forward from this kind of, from this kind of political maelstrom,
Right.
Because everything has become a chaos here. From the same political party, you are allowing independent candidates to contest as candidates of your own in the elections. Do you think it is a democratic norms? It is in no way a democratic practice.
Right, Professor.
Practice anywhere in the world. So we have to rethink actually. Is a paradigmic shift that has taken place in Bangladesh, and a real political, political reassessment is necessary. Political consensus is necessary.
Right.
And if what I see, that this has set a very chaotic political tradition in the country. Hopefully, the elections that are coming next, decades or next years, that will be far more problematic. What
Right.
we are seeing today,
Right,
this
Professor
practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much for taking our time and joining us here on WION, sharing insights with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.